At 83 years old, Chuck Norris has finally broken his silence, and what he reveals about Bruce Lee will leave you speechless. Behind the iconic fight in Way of the Dragon was a friendship full of secrets, conflict, and untold respect. But what really happened behind the scenes? What warning signs did Chuck see before Bruce's shocking death? And why does he still light a candle for him every year? The truth is more emotional, more personal, and more powerful than anyone expected. Stick around, because once you hear Chuck's words, you'll never see Bruce Lee the same way again. The Colosseum fight that shook the world. It's one of the most iconic scenes ever captured on film. Way of the Dragon, 1972. The Roman Colosseum stands silent, bathed in ancient sunlight. No crowd, no chaos, just two men, alone. Bruce Lee, lean and focused. Chuck Norris, broad-shouldered and brimming with power. The world had never seen anything like it. This wasn't just a martial arts fight, it was myth come to life. The East clashed with the West, not through politics, but through fists and footwork. Every frame pulsed with intensity. Every movement felt both lethal and elegant. Behind the scenes, it was Bruce who choreographed the fight, down to the smallest detail. But it wasn't a solo performance. Chuck didn't come to just throw punches. He came to make it real. Bruce didn't just want to win, Chuck said in a recent interview. He wanted to say something through the fight. It was storytelling through movement. And that story? It was about philosophy, about the beauty in combat, about respect. But as breathtaking as the on-screen result was, filming it wasn't always easy. Tension simmered behind the camera, not out of rivalry, but because both men cared so deeply about getting it right. Chuck wanted realism. Bruce wanted rhythm. That balance created sparks, creative ones. We pushed each other, Chuck admitted. But that's what made it great. The fight in the Colosseum wasn't just the climax of a film. It became a symbol of unity, of mutual respect, and of what happens when two martial artists come together not to destroy, but to elevate one another. And when the cameras stopped rolling, something unexpected had begun. A real bond between warriors. The real story of their friendship. Before Hollywood, before legends were made, there were just two men meeting on a competition floor in 1967. Bruce Lee was already a rising star, capturing attention with his speed and charisma. Chuck Norris was a national karate champion, sharp, focused, and humble. They weren't friends yet. They were rivals, but something shifted. Instead of trying to outshine each other, they became fascinated with what made the other tick. Bruce was agile and explosive. Chuck was disciplined and methodical. They could have clashed, but they connected. Soon, Chuck was visiting Bruce's backyard. They trained together, explored each other's techniques, and challenged each other in the best ways. No ego, no cameras, just two martial artists learning. Bruce had a different way of thinking, Chuck said. He wasn't tied down by tradition. That opened my eyes. Bruce admired Chuck's precision and control. Chuck admired Bruce's creativity and vision. The friendship that bloomed wasn't based on fame. It was built on shared values, hard work, humility, and the constant hunger to improve. Their connection wasn't loud or performative. It was real. And when Way of the Dragon came around, Bruce didn't cast Chuck for fame. He cast him because he trusted him. Still, like any deep relationship, theirs would be tested. Jeet Kune Do and Chuck's transformation. Before Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris trained in traditional forms: karate, kata, Discipline etched into muscle memory. It was clean, structured, predictable. Then Bruce introduced him to Jeet Kune Do. "Be water, my friend," Bruce famously said. It wasn't just a metaphor. It was a revolution. Bruce believed in shedding what didn't work, in adapting, in fighting without limitation. For Chuck, it was like learning a new language after a lifetime of speaking the old one. "Bruce taught me that sometimes not having a form is the strongest form of all," Chuck said. At first, it wasn't easy. Chuck was used to defined techniques, rehearsed sequences, but training with Bruce taught him to move differently, to feel instead of just follow. He began to blend traditional power with spontaneous flow. His strikes became faster, his timing sharper, and more than that, his mind opened. The transformation was deeper than physical. Bruce challenged Chuck's entire philosophy on martial arts, not to replace it, but to expand it. Chuck didn't become Bruce Lee. He became a better version of Chuck Norris. Their training became a kind of shared meditation, a wordless dialogue between two men who, through combat, were learning trust, vulnerability, and respect. But even in friendship, friction can arise. And on set, it did. A private disagreement that nearly ended it all. The set of Way of the Dragon was electric, but not always peaceful. Midway through filming the Colosseum fight, a disagreement broke out. It wasn't over something big. It was over seconds. A small section of choreography. Bruce wanted a poetic rhythm, almost like a dance. Chuck wanted it to feel real. "No fluff," he said, "just the fight." They clashed, and for a moment, things got tense. Chuck, always respectful but firm, voiced his concern. Bruce, passionate and fiery, dug in. The back and forth turned sharp. Voices rose, crew members stepped back. At one point, Chuck walked off the set, thinking he might quit the project entirely. But later that day, Bruce came to him. "Sometimes my passion blinds me," Bruce said. "I'm sorry." Those words landed hard. Bruce rarely apologized, but when he did, it came from the heart. Chuck stayed. They adjusted the choreography together. What emerged was a perfect blend: Bruce's visual storytelling and Chuck's raw realism. That moment didn't destroy their friendship. It made it stronger. Still, it gave Chuck a glimpse into the deeper layers of Bruce's life. The pressure, the stress, the emotional toll behind the legend's smiles. Behind Bruce's smile. The pressure he faced. Bruce Lee had a smile that could disarm anyone. Sharp eyes, quick wit, unshakable confidence. But behind that, Chuck saw something most didn't. Bruce wasn't just an actor or a fighter. He was a pioneer. The first major Asian lead in a white-dominated Hollywood. Every movie, every scene, every interview, he felt the weight of representation, of expectation, of breaking through walls that weren't built for him. He never said it outright, Chuck recalled, but you could feel it. He was carrying something heavy. Bruce trained harder than anyone Chuck had ever seen. He slept little. He worked non-stop. It wasn't for vanity. It was survival. He knew he had to be better, faster, stronger, just to be seen as equal. And on top of that, racism, isolation, the constant fear of being replaced or erased. Chuck once said, he wasn't acting, he was fighting for all of us, for every outsider who ever wanted to be seen. That kind of pressure changes a person. It pushes them, but it also wears them down. And in 1973, The cracks finally began to show. Bruce's mysterious collapse. Chuck's first warning sign. In May of 1973, something happened that haunted Chuck Norris for years afterward. Bruce Lee, unstoppable, untouchable Bruce Lee, collapsed. He was in Hong Kong, deep into production on Enter the Dragon, a film that was poised to take him global. Bruce had been pushing harder than ever, training relentlessly, barely sleeping, pouring himself into the project like it was his final chance to make a statement. And then, without warning, his body gave out. Doctors diagnosed it as cerebral edema, swelling of the brain. They gave him medication. He seemed to recover, and within days, Bruce was back on set, training, kicking, working like nothing had happened. But Chuck knew something was wrong. "When I heard he collapsed," Chuck said in a later interview, "it was like hearing a crack in armor. Bruce didn't collapse. That just didn't happen." Bruce had always been extreme in his pursuit of excellence. He didn't rest. He didn't believe in taking it easy. His routine was almost inhuman. High-volume training, an almost experimental diet, and intense self-discipline. But somewhere in all of that control, Bruce had stopped listening to his body. He thought he could will it stronger, Chuck reflected. That mindset, it's powerful, but it's also dangerous. The collapse wasn't a fluke. It was the body's alarm bell ringing. But Bruce, wired to defy limitations, brushed it off. He kept going, kept pushing, kept climbing a mountain that was starting to crumble underneath him. For Chuck, it was the first sign that something far more serious was looming. Something no amount of discipline could beat. And then, just weeks later, Bruce was gone. July 20th, 1973. The day the dragon fell. It was supposed to be an ordinary afternoon. Bruce Lee was at actress Betty Ting Pei's apartment, working on a script. They were talking, laughing, planning. Then Bruce said he had a headache and asked to lie down. He never woke up. The news hit the world like a tidal wave. Bruce Lee, dead at 32. Fans were in disbelief. Fellow actors were stunned. But Chuck Norris? Chuck felt something deeper, something colder. "I got the call," he recalled, "and I just froze. The world just went quiet." Chuck had trained with Bruce, bled with him, laughed with him. Bruce's body was a machine, powerful, disciplined, finely tuned. The idea that it had simply stopped working was hard to comprehend. The official cause of death was cerebral edema, just like the episode in May. But for Chuck, that answer didn't settle anything. There was something too sudden, too final about it, something that didn't fit. He was strong, Chuck said, but he was tired. He was burning on both ends. And I think, in the end, that caught up with him. The world lost a hero that day, a pioneer, a trailblazer. But Chuck lost a brother, and his grief would quietly simmer under the surface until he finally found the words. A cocktail of determination and danger. Years passed, tributes poured in, documentaries were made, conspiracy theories swirled. But Chuck Norris stayed mostly quiet, until one day he finally opened up. And what he shared wasn't wild or speculative. It was personal, honest, based on observation and memory. Bruce, Chuck explained, had always pushed his body to extremes. He took royal jelly and ginseng daily. He downed gallons of water. He fasted. He trained for hours without pause, even after sustaining a back injury in 1968 that left him nearly paralyzed. That injury, Chuck believed, never fully healed. But Bruce never stopped. He didn't want to stop, Chuck said. He wanted to keep climbing, even when the mountain was breaking underneath him. Bruce was also obsessed with perfection. He needed to be better than anyone, faster, leaner, stronger. Hollywood had given him one shot, and he was going to make it count, even if it meant sacrificing sleep, nutrition, sanity. Chuck believes it wasn't one thing that killed Bruce. It was 1,000 small ones. Choices made in silence. Habits forged in pressure. A slow buildup of physical stress that finally snapped. His fire burned too hot, Chuck said, and too fast. It wasn't negligence. It wasn't recklessness. It was devotion, taken too far. But that wasn't the only theory that emerged. A new perspective. In recent years, a new theory has gained ground. One that adds a tragic twist to the story Chuck already knew. Biographer Matthew Polly, after deep research, revealed something shocking. Bruce Lee had his sweat glands surgically removed from his armpits. Why? Vanity, so he wouldn't sweat on camera. Chuck Norris, upon learning this, was floored. That shocked me, he admitted. Bruce was so smart about his body. But none of us saw that coming. Without those glands, Bruce's body had a harder time cooling down. And on that July day in Hong Kong, the temperature was soaring. Bruce had also taken a painkiller and a tranquilizer, both of which can affect the nervous system and thermoregulation. Add that to an already fatigued, dehydrated, overworked body, and it paints a chilling picture. One of heat stroke, masked as cerebral edema. A man slowly cooked from the inside out, without knowing it. To Chuck, this made Bruce's death even more heartbreaking. He wasn't killed in a stunt, or a fight. He didn't go down in a blaze of glory. He was undone by the very body he'd spent a lifetime perfecting. But still, not everyone was convinced. Because in Bruce's world, there were always enemies in the shadows. Shadows in the Dragon's Den. In the days after Bruce Lee's death, rumors began to swirl, some quiet, some loud, but all chilling. People in Hong Kong whispered about the triads, China's infamous organized crime groups. For decades, they had controlled parts of the film industry. They offered protection. But Bruce didn't play that game. He refused to pay, refused to bow. He spoke his mind, fought who he wanted, said what he meant. He broke the mold, and in doing so, made enemies. Some believe Bruce's refusal to cooperate with the triads cost him dearly. There were whispers of poison, of shadowy figures slipping into apartments, of pressure point assassinations, silent techniques passed down in secret martial arts lineages. To many, it sounded like a movie script. But in Bruce's life, truth often blurred with myth. Chuck Norris never leaned into the conspiracies, but he didn't dismiss them outright either. "I don't buy most of it," he said carefully. But Bruce had enemies. He just wasn't afraid of them. And maybe that fearlessness is what made him legendary. But the most haunting question wasn't about enemies. It was about fate. Coming up next, was Bruce Lee's death part of something deeper? Something written in his bloodline? The Lee family curse. Fate or coincidence? Some stories linger not because they're proven true, but because they feel too eerie to ignore. And when it comes to Bruce Lee, whispers of a family curse have followed his legacy like a shadow. Bruce's death at just 32 stunned the world. But those closest to him remembered a lifetime of strange signs and superstitions that seemed to warn this moment was always coming. Long before Bruce found fame, tragedy struck. His older brother died in childhood, and his parents feared something sinister might be targeting their sons. In Chinese tradition, it was believed that evil spirits hunted firstborn males. To confuse those spirits, Bruce's parents gave him a girl's name, Sai Fawn, meaning small phoenix. It was a desperate attempt to protect him from a fate they didn't fully understand. But the darkness didn't stop there. As Bruce's fame exploded, he became increasingly obsessed with his own mortality. He spoke often of death, not as something distant, but as a reality approaching fast. He told his wife Linda McCartney chilling words, "I don't think I'll live past 35. He had dreams of coffins, of silence, of final scenes never filmed. And then came the tragedy that made those dreams unbearable to remember. In 1993, 20 years after Bruce's death, his son Brandon Lee was killed on a movie set. A prop gun fired a real bullet during the filming of The Crow. Brandon, just 28, was on the cusp of breaking out, just like his father had been. It wasn't just a tragedy. It was a mirror. Another Lee, another movie, another ending that came far too soon. Chuck Norris, shaken by the news, later said, "It was like watching lightning strike twice. Same blood, same brilliance, same brutal ending." Was it fate? Coincidence? Or something else entirely? Whatever the truth, the pain remains. And to those who loved them, the loss of both Bruce and Brandon still feels like a cruel pattern, etched into history with unbearable precision. A second son lost. When Chuck Norris first met Brandon Lee, he felt a strange sense of déjà vu. Brandon had his father's presence, the quiet confidence, the piercing eyes, the unmistakable aura of someone meant for greatness. But he also had his own fire. He wasn't just Bruce's son. He was a star in his own right, walking a path that was both a tribute and a challenge. Chuck became a mentor, and over time, a friend. They trained together, talked about film, laughed about life under the weight of a famous name. Brandon once told Chuck, "I want to make my father proud, but I also want to be me." He was on the verge of doing just that. The Crow, Brandon's dark and ambitious role, was set to launch him into the stratosphere. It had all the makings of a cult classic, and it needed a leading man with depth and edge. Brandon delivered both. Then came the day that changed everything. On March 31st, 1993, Brandon was shot by a defective prop gun. A real bullet had been accidentally lodged in the barrel. No one knew. No one checked. And just like that, the movie turned into a memorial. Chuck remembers hearing the news like a punch to the chest. "It was like losing Bruce all over again," he whispered. Except this time, the pain cut even deeper. He attended Brandon's funeral with a heavy heart. Surrounded by mourners, Chuck couldn't stop thinking of what might have been. He didn't just lose a protege. He lost another brother. Two legends, two lives, two stories that ended far too early. And after Brandon's death, something in Chuck shifted forever. Chuck's quiet exit. The martial arts world didn't slow down after Bruce Lee's death. It sped up. Suddenly, studios scrambled to find the next Bruce. Clones emerged. Lookalikes filled theaters. Films were churned out with flying kicks and paper-thin plots. The genre Bruce had revolutionized was now being mass-produced. But Chuck Norris didn't jump in. He stepped back. "I didn't want to be part of the imitation game," Chuck admitted. Without Bruce, something was missing. The heart, the purpose. He took fewer roles, focused more on building his own martial arts system, one rooted in discipline, not fame. He taught, he wrote, he spent time with his family. Chuck found peace in the shadows, not the spotlight. Producers came knocking with offers, big checks, lead roles, tribute projects that tried to repackage Bruce's image. Chuck refused them. "I didn't want to profit off his ghost," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Bruce was irreplaceable, so I didn't try." He could have built an empire off Bruce's memory, but instead, he chose integrity. Chuck's quiet exit wasn't just a career decision. It was an act of respect. While others mimicked the dragon, Chuck lit a candle in his honor. And speaking of candles, there's one that still burns in a special place. The photo that still haunts Chuck. In the quiet corner of Chuck Norris's Texas home, away from trophies, movie posters, and memorabilia, sits a single-framed photo. It's not flashy, it's not even big, but to Chuck, it holds more weight than any award ever could. The photo is from the set of Way of the Dragon. It captures Bruce Lee standing inside the Roman Colosseum, mid-scene, shirtless and focused, fists clenched, posture coiled like a spring. His eyes aren't looking at the camera, they're locked on something far beyond it. Some say it's his opponent. Others say it's fate itself. That photo has never moved from its spot. It's been there for decades, and it has never, not once, collected dust. Because every July 20th, on the anniversary of Bruce's death, Chuck lights a single white candle beneath it. No words, no ceremony, just silence and flame. To most, it's a striking image of two martial arts titans at their peak. But to Chuck, it's a portal, a window to a friendship that was equal parts laughter and legacy. Looking at that photo, he doesn't just remember Way of the Dragon, he remembers the way Bruce lived. "I still talk to him," Chuck once confessed in a rare moment of raw honesty. "I still feel him in the room sometimes, like he's watching or waiting." When Chuck gazes at that frame, memories flood in. He hears Bruce's footsteps echoing through studio floors. He sees him bursting into a room with wild energy, half laughing, half lecturing about martial philosophy. He remembers the debates that stretched long into the night about rhythm, discipline, Eastern thought, and the soul of a warrior. Bruce wasn't just a co-star or a sparring partner. He was a brother in arms, a kindred spirit. Chuck remembers the funny moments too, Bruce sneaking rubber snakes onto props, mimicking Chuck's Texas accent until they both cried laughing. He remembers Bruce's love for prank wars just as clearly as he remembers the force behind his kicks. But what weighs the heaviest, what Chuck can't let go of, is what they didn't get to finish. "We were planning another film," Chuck revealed. Something different, something powerful. He had so many ideas, ideas the world never got to see. That film was never made. The pages stayed unwritten. The stories stayed untold. So the photo isn't just a keepsake. It's a reminder of potential unfulfilled, of time stolen, of a friendship interrupted by fate. And though decades have passed, though Chuck himself has aged into legend, he still lights that candle, year after year, flame after flame. Because for Chuck, Bruce Lee isn't gone. He's just in another room, waiting for one more scene, one more laugh, one more story they never got to finish. And that single photo? It speaks louder than any tribute ever could. Two legends, one legacy. Time may pass, hair may gray, films may fade from memory, but some bonds, some legacies, never die. Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris didn't just fight in Way of the Dragon, they collaborated, they connected, they co-created something bigger than both of them. They turned martial arts into philosophy, into poetry, into power that wasn't about violence, but about expression. Bruce taught Chuck about flow, how to react, adapt, become like water. Chuck taught Bruce about grounding, how strength could also be stillness. Together, they built a bridge between cultures, styles, even continents. Bruce wasn't just fighting on screen, Chuck once said. He was fighting to be seen, fighting to change how the world saw Asian men, fighting for freedom. And that fight didn't end with his death. Chuck kept it alive, in silence, in memory, in legacy. Now, at 83, Chuck's voice is softer. But when he speaks of Bruce, the emotion is raw. The truth is, I still miss him, he says with tears in his eyes. Every day. Two legends, one legacy, one friendship that changed the world and never truly ended. Chuck Norris didn't just share memories, he revealed a bond that shaped two legends. If this story moved you, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more untold truths, and let us know what moment hit you hardest. Thanks for watching. And remember, legends never truly leave us.